Welcome to this explainer. Today we're stepping right into a dimly lit ancient Egyptian room to witness something incredible. We're going to watch a dying patriarch draft the architectural blueprint for a nation that will literally change history. We're looking at the exact foundational moment when 147-year-old Jacob gathers his sons around his deathbed to pronounce 12 distinct prophetic blessings. It's a truly fascinating look at why exactly 12 tribes built Israel and how this highly specific kind of chaotic family structure became the absolute bedrock of a civilization.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to explore how the messy, fractured dynamics of 4 mothers and 12 sons forged a highly structured national confederation. We'll be looking at the architecture of a nation, Leah's sons, the handmaid's sons, Rachel's sons, and finally how they all formed one unified people.
Let's jump into Section 1, the architecture of a nation, the deathbed blueprint in Egypt.
So our story doesn't begin with a formal charter or some polished legislative document. It starts with a family. And honestly, what a family it is. Jacob is surrounded by sons who have been deeply shaped by polygamy, rivalry, intense favoritism, and profound grief. Yet, out of all this chaos, a divine mathematics emerges. As Jacob utters these incredibly poetic, prophetic oracles, he's actually doing 2 things at once. He's passing brutal judgment on their pasts, but he's also planting the seeds for their future vocations. He isn't just speaking to individuals here, he is literally laying down the structural pillars of Israel.
Now, what is really interesting to note is how the origins of Israel's tribes map directly back to the 4 mothers. They basically provide the architectural wings of the nation. You have Leah, the unloved wife, whose sons amazingly become the foundation of priests and kings. Then you've got the handmaids, Bilhah and Zilpah. Their sons become the rugged frontier defenders. And finally, you have Rachel, the beloved wife, whose sons step into these incredibly favored powerful roles. The messy sociology of this family directly dictates the geopolitical and spiritual map of Israel.
Moving to Section 2, Leah's sons, the unloved foundation, birthright, violence, and praise.
We have to begin with Leah. She was the wife Jacob didn't actually choose, right? But in a striking twist of providence, she gives birth to half the tribes of Israel. And it's fascinating to watch how the crucial covenant blessing, that ultimate right to rule, migrates right past the failures of the first 3 sons. Reuben loses it, Simeon loses it, Levi loses it. It skips all the way down the line until it securely rests on the 4th son, Judah.
Let's talk about Reuben for a second. He completely squandered his firstborn status and that double portion inheritance. His fatal mistake was a reckless sexual transgression with Bilhah, his father's concubine. Jacob describes him perfectly as unstable as water, like water that just can't be contained and naturally rushes to the lowest possible point. Because of this, his tribe was condemned to historical obscurity. In fact, if you look at later biblical texts, they actually mock Reuben's descendants for just sitting around the sheepfolds while the other tribes went off to war.
Then you've got the next 2 brothers, Simeon and Levi. They are lumped together in Jacob's oracle because of their violent massacre of the city of Shechem. Jacob outright curses their anger and declares they will be divided and scattered. But here is where we see a dramatic historical reversal. Simeon just kind of faded away and got absorbed into Judah. But Levi's scattering was brilliantly repurposed. Hundreds of years later, when Israel was worshiping the golden calf, the Levites were the ones who rallied to Moses. So God took Jacob's curse of scattering and totally flipped it into a blessing. He made the Levites the omnipresent, dispersed priestly custodians of the tabernacle.
So here's the real kicker. Judah, a flawed son of the unloved wife, becomes the eternal throne line. Jacob's oracle emphatically declares that the royal scepter will not depart from Judah. From this specific, unlikely lineage, we eventually get King David, King Solomon, and ultimately Jesus. It all traces back to a mother's praise cry at her 4th son's birth, giving us the lion of the tribe of Judah that we later see mentioned in Revelation.
Rounding out Leah's sons, we have Issachar and Zebulun, who really grounded the nation geographically. Issachar settled right in the fertile Jezreel Valley and became known for this rare, incredible gift, understanding the times and knowing exactly what Israel ought to do. Zebulun's territory, meanwhile, was beautifully destined to become the very stage for Jesus' Galilean ministry centuries later. It goes to show that physical space here is also theological space.
Which brings us to Section 3, the handmaid's sons, frontier defenders, the children of Bilhah and Zilpah.
These 4 men had pretty ambiguous social origins within the family hierarchy, and that directly translated into peripheral, fiercely contested, but absolutely vital roles. Together, they formed the rugged, defensive perimeter of Israel. You've got Gad's fierce, lion-faced warriors out in the exposed eastern territory of the Transjordan. You have Asher enjoying wealthy, prosperous olive groves on the coast. You have Naphtali, described as swift as a released doe up in the beautiful Galilee. And then, you have Dan.
Now, Dan's oracle is fascinating, but it's also a bit dark. Jacob calls him a serpent in the way, a viper utilizing guerrilla tactics to bite the horse's heels. We see this exact energy famously embodied by the judge Samson, who operated almost entirely through riddles and violent ambushes. But this serpentine nature eventually led to deep unease and widespread northern idolatry. Because of that, Dan is notoriously the only tribe omitted from the 144,000 sealed in the book of Revelation.
Section 4. Rachel's sons. The favored. Joseph and Benjamin.
As we know, Rachel was Jacob's absolute true love, and her children carried the profound marks of suffering, incredible resourcefulness, and a peculiar proximity to both death and life. Take Joseph. His harrowing journey, from literally being thrown into a pit of slavery by his own brothers to rising up as the vizier of the entire Egyptian empire, is the ultimate masterclass in divine providence. Joseph sums it up perfectly himself. God actively weaves human malice into cosmic salvation. The exact same act, two completely different authors with totally opposite purposes.
Because he was the favorite, Joseph actually received the firstborn's double portion. But surprisingly, he didn't get one single direct tribe named after him. Instead, Jacob formally adopted Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, essentially turning his grandsons into tribal heads. And right here we see God subverting human expectation all over again. Jacob intentionally crosses his arms and places his right hand on Ephraim, the younger son, instead of Manasseh. It's grace over primogeniture, God's freedom overruling human tradition.
And then there's Benjamin, the son whose birth literally cost Rachel her life. Jacob prophesied that Benjamin would be a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey and at evening dividing the spoil. But later on, Moses called him the beloved of the Lord. This dual prophecy is astonishingly fulfilled by two of his most famous descendants. First, you have the fierce, deeply self-destructive King Saul, Israel's very first king, who operated with all that ravenous wolf energy. Second, you have another Saul, Saul of Tarsus, who we know better as the Apostle Paul. Paul the persecutor was the wolf hunting down the early church, but post-Damascus, that exact same unstoppable territorial energy was completely redirected to safely carry the gospel across the entire Roman world. It's just mind-blowing.
Which brings us to our final culmination. Section 5. 12 tribes, 1 people. The architecture of eternity.
So how on earth did these messy, distinct, often warring individuals forge a unified, unshakable covenant community? This 12-tribe structure isn't just some fun piece of biblical trivia, it is the literal organizing principle of the entire narrative. God didn't deal with a faceless monolith, he dealt with a highly specific family. The Promised Land was divided geographically by these tribes, the national armies were mustered by them, Jesus deliberately chose 12 apostles specifically to mirror them, and in Revelation, the New Jerusalem is actually built with 12 gates, forever named after these 12 sons. This family structure is embedded so deeply into history that it literally becomes the architectural blueprint for eternity.
Which leaves us with this final thought for you to take away today. Jacob's family was marked by severe betrayal, violence, favoritism, and profound loss. Yet God, with infinite patience and incomprehensible wisdom, didn't just sanitize their sin, he actively redeemed its consequences to build a nation. So if the grand architecture of eternity itself was built from the deeply flawed sons of Jacob, what messy realities might the sovereign God be quietly working through in our world today? It's a pretty amazing perspective to carry with you. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.